welcome. My hair's a mess. Hello and welcome to Hashtag Power Up, your weekly boost of virtual training sponsored by the International Sunday School Department of the Churches of God in Christ. Thank you so much for joining us on today. As you come in, do what we normally do: like, share, comment, let us know where you're viewing us from. If you are TAC, LEAP, Biblical Justice, or what's the new one? If you're in SALT now, let us know. If you're in the first cohort of SALT, let us know. We are just interested in having all of our Sunday school family come in. Today is just going to be a dynamic and a kind of wonderful presentation. I'm excited to get into it. But first, let's do our greetings. We greet our international presiding bishop, the Bishop J. Sheard, our international supervisor, the Mother Barbara McCool-Lewis, and to our International Sunday School Department President, Dr. Mark Ellis, and our field representative, Lady Bonita Shelby. On today, we have Kevin Johnson, second Cohen, and I guess he's going to have to tell us that there's a wife. She's here. We need to have her on as well. She's also an artist that we need to talk to. But he's a Baltimore native and an experimental storyteller dedicated to envisioning transcendent futures for marginalized communities. As lead of publication design and marketing strategy for the Chicory Project, Kevin is involved in amplifying diverse voices through artistic expression and community engagement. Kevin is developing an interactive thematic project entitled Futures Not Imagined, They Will Not See Us, Faces Without Features, We Do Not Exist, which explores the impact of AI on the perceptions and narratives surrounding marginalized groups, cultural erasure, and digital resurrection. One aspect of this project, Existence Beyond Code, will be on display at the Maryland Center for History and Culture starting in December 2024. Additionally, along with his wife, Jen, who's an artist, designer, educator, and activist, and their son, Kevin III, aka Knox, they authored Knox Rocks, a photo essay collection to increase visibility of Black and Brown kids in the autism and neurodiverse communities. Through all of his endeavors, Kevin's vision is to challenge conventional narratives and create space for marginalized communities to thrive in the surreal landscapes of here and beyond. Won't you please welcome to Hashtag Power Up for the first time, Brother Kevin Johnson Jr. There we are. You have to cut your mic on, I think.
There we go.
How are you?
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm so glad to have you with us today. Thank you for agreeing to participate with us. This is Black History Month, and when I saw the Facebook post of this particular art exhibit, I thought this would be ideal presentation for Hashtag Power Up, especially during Black History Month, because it's a topic that we're talking about AI, but this is a presentation that I don't think most people, including myself, really have thought about AI on this level. And so we're really excited to hear about this presentation on today. And so we're going to turn it over into your hands, and we'll see you in a few.
So good evening, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity, the space, the privilege to be here with you all. It hasn't escaped me how important this platform is, how far the reach is, and the incredible amount of work that goes into this platform, as well as amplifying the voices that are featured on it and building up other members of the kingdom. So I'm very, very happy to be here. I feel very fortunate to be here. Before we get into the presentation proper, there is a brief excerpt from a video that I started to produce for the exhibit that is an abbreviated version of a feature-length documentary that will also be featured this year as part of the exhibit and as an extension of the overall thematic project. And I think that'll help set the tone for the presentation and kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we'll be discussing this evening. So I think I can hand it back over to have that video play, and then we'll see you in a minute.
Welcome to Existence Beyond Code, an exploration of identity in the digital age. This exhibit invites you to question, to reflect, and to engage with the complex relationship between technology and the human experience. In this video, what you're witnessing is both real and unreal. A digital palimpsest where news footage bleeds into AI hallucinations, where authentic voices mingle with synthetic echoes, where actual images dissolve into machine-dreamed approximations. This video piece serves as a visual meditation on the boundaries between representation and reality, showcasing the very technologies we critique while examining their limitations. Through layered footage, generative processes, and manipulated media, we create a mirror that reflects the distortions inherent in digital representation. This is not a guide to the exhibit, but rather a component of it, an ambient exploration of how machines attempt to process, reproduce, and reimagine human existence. As you watch, consider which elements feel authentic, which feel artificial. And in a world where artificial intelligence can create and manipulate images, what does it mean to be truly seen?
So as you can probably infer from the last message attached to that video, the person, quote unquote, featured in that was not real. They were an approximation of humanity on one of the specific generative platforms that are available. And it goes to show you just how advanced these tools are and how quickly they're evolving. And at the time that I created that portion of the video, that was, a while ago, because we were, getting the exhibit started and ramping up for the opening, and I was beginning the work on the documentary. And since then, the tools have advanced even further. So part of what you'll see, not only in the presentation, but as well as the exhibit, if you have an opportunity to visit, or when you see some of the forthcoming projects that are a part of the exhibit, is just how rapidly these tools evolve, how to train yourself to recognize them, because we're in a situation, in a socio-political climate where these things are being used actively for messaging, for both edification and for harm. So part of this presentation is also educating you on recognizing these things, recognizing how they're being used, and just how pervasive they are. And I think with that, we can get right into the presentation. So the presentation and the exhibit as a whole is called Existence Beyond Code. And the question that kind of spurned this was, what happens when algorithms try to dream us, the Black community, into existence? As a Black writer and artist and technologist, I've been watching our stories, our faces, our essence being fed into AI systems. And I keep wondering, do these machines truly see us? Do they see our complexities? Do they see our stories? Do they understand the nuances of our cultural history and our representation and the need for such? So the exhibition, as you'll see, started with a collection of digital portraits, but it's not limited to that. And with those digital portraits, I wanted them to reflect that they were essentially a mirror, reflecting that distorted ways AI attempts to imagine us into being, and have it be a call to conversation about how we use those tools for either community edification or alternatively work in opposition to them altogether. And so within the exhibit, I'm wrestling with those themes, whether, we can use them to imagine Black futures, or do we worry about how they're being used in Black presence, how they're being used for surveillance, how they're being used for subjugation, how they're being used in ways that don't uplift our community but actively harm it. And alternatively, I see artists and creatives and engineers using them in ways to build up our community, to allow for more access, to restructure power in ways that are more advantageous for community. So that's kind of how the exhibit started. And as you'll see, it kind of grew from there. So each of these images that you see on the screen were generated in a different generative tool. And I'll kind of go over what some of those are. But as you can see, in an era defined by rapid technological advancements and the pervasive presence of digital spaces, the exhibit delves into the relationship between technology, identity, and existence, with a particular focus on the experiences of Black communities. And, one of the questions that I got at the exhibit opening was why the focus specifically on the Black community. I mean, obviously, apart from that being my lived experience, one of the things that was important to me is that because these sorts of technological spaces continue a trend of areas that we're historically excluded from, it's important to me to show how these tools are being used and how they're being used to represent us in spaces where we, again, often haven't had the opportunity to represent ourselves. Existence Beyond Code engages with this historical context through formal elements, these formal elements. The use of AI-generated portraits is a deliberate choice that reflects the growing influence of technology on identity formation and representation. And again, each of these are created using a different tool. And again, these tools are not just available at a corporate or business level. These are tools that are available for anyone. Some are paid, some are free, some are open source. But part of the duality of this discussion is that it's a great thing that these tools are available to everyone. But at the same time, these tools are available to everyone. One of the examples that is featured in the video is the current sitting president used this tool or various tools to restructure an historic Martin Luther King Jr. speech to have it serve as an endorsement for his campaign. And again, these tools are readily available to any and everyone, and it isn't that difficult to use them. In fact, part of the level of access is how simple these tools are becoming to use. And as a result of that, we're in a space where we have to be continuously vigilant about what we see, how we consume media, and what we recognize as authentic or not. The exhibition also incorporates video media and comparative displays showing the impact of different stylization levels on representation and time lapses of images being generated. And just kind of break that down because that starts to get into some of the technical aspects of some of these tools and platforms. There's an example that is featured within the presentation where the prompt that the tool was given, that I gave the tool, resulted in a default image based on its own understanding of Black features, as well as what it understood as beautiful or attractive, versus when I told it to strip all of that away, essentially go against what your default settings are and give me something that more closely approximates the authentic image that I was looking for, then you'll see that compared on the right. And again, these portraits that you'll see represent the promise and the peril of AI generative tools. Each image that you see has been created through a deliberate process of technological intervention and resistance. And what I mean by that is, again, actively seeing how far these tools need to be pushed to authentically represent Black people, the Black lived experience, and just visually how we are represented in digital spaces. Some portraits that you see embrace digital artifacts, which are those errors that can occur when AI can't properly process our features or just has difficulty emulating what human beings look like in general. And those are some of the things that, again, I'll go into that you'll see, need to be part of how we train ourselves in terms of media literacy and understanding what we see oftentimes isn't exactly what's present. So again, future is not imagined. They will not see us. Faces without features, we do not exist. That's the overall project that the Existence Beyond Code exhibit is a part of, where I'm examining AI and generative tools' impact on Black community and our representation. It challenges the pervasive invisibility and misrepresentation of Black communities in technological spaces. It addresses cultural erasure and digital resurrection. And when I say digital resurrection, what I specifically mean is how these tools are being used to access elements of our history in ways that we do not approve for messaging that does not represent our community's best interest, right? So again, going back to that example of how it was used to endorse a candidate that ultimately does not have our best interests in mind. Those types of things are being done actively, not only to erase history, as this is Black History Month, but to secure a level of power that isn't available to us when we look to our futures, right? The brackets that you see in the title are intentional. Those represent those in-between liminal type spaces, the moments between visibility and invisibility, between existence and erasure. So that's why you see those things in brackets there. Other elements that I'll go into that are a part of the overall project include a zine workbook that presents discussion questions and things for personal reflection in regards to some of these themes, as well as the exhibition catalog and several other things. So hopefully everybody can see. I know it's a lot of text. I was doing my best to ensure that the presentation was informative, but not too dense. So I was trying to find, that balance, but I wanted to give some background because I don't want to assume everybody's understanding of what AI is or where we currently are in AI and its development. So AI is a broad field that involves creating computer systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as learning, problem solving, and decision making. These systems use algorithms and vast amounts of data to identify patterns, make predictions, and adapt to new information. AI is used in various applications, from voice assistants. I'm sure everyone, if you have a smartphone, you have a voice assistant, whether you like it or not, and self-driving cars to medical diagnoses and financial trading. And I give, a few examples there. So I'm going to kind of go into, again, some of the branching family of AI and how it exists right now, as well as some of the tools that were powered by AI that helped create this exhibit, as well as some of the uses of AI that you may or may not be aware of that you're actively using, even if you don't intend to. So, again, within the framework of Existence Beyond Code, AI takes a more nuanced meaning, specifically referring to generative AI tools like Midjourney, Gemini, Runway, Flux, and Stable Diffusion. So Gemini is Google's entrance into the AI space. You may have seen it on your phone. If you have an Android, if you use Gmail, you might have seen a pop-up come up saying, hey, you want me to help you write this email a little bit better, or, whatever the case may be. That's how integrated AI is now. No matter what area that you're working in professionally, there's probably something that you use that if it doesn't have AI now, that there's going to be a feature rollout or an update that includes it very soon. As you can see, there's a few articles here. Amid AI creative boom is concern around the potential erasure of authentic Black perspectives, or, Black representation in tech matters to special education students, or overcoming AI's diversity problem when creating images. These aren't just recent articles. These are articles that have been published within the past year, 2 years, 3 years. This is something that, again, even if you haven't been aware of it, you've likely encountered it if you use social media. And again, no matter what your professional area of expertise might be. So again, hopefully you can see, everything with this slide. So at the top here, we have artificial intelligence. And that's the kind of overarching, idea of everything. And then you have under that narrow AI, which is ANI, artificial general intelligence, and artificial super intelligence. These two last columns are more hypothetical, or at least in terms of public consumption, but are still actively being worked on, because these are things that are supposed to more closely emulate human understanding, knowledge attainment, growth at a level that hasn't been seen yet, at least public facing. What we're going to be talking about specifically, and what the exhibit is kind of powered by, is generative AI, which is under narrow AI. Oh, wait, lost my cursor for a second there. Hold on. Oh, wait, hold on. I lost my cursor. Some technical difficulties. Give me one moment here. So sorry. Okay, I think we are back. Okay. There we go. So narrow AI is the most common type of AI today. It's like a specialist who's really good at one thing. So AI, that type of AI, narrow AI, is everything from the spam filters that learn to identify junk emails and keep your inbox clean, to facial recognition that you use to unlock your phone or tag friends in photos, virtual assistants like Siri or Alexa, platform. I'm sorry if I triggered anybody's device with that. Platforms and tools that are used for content generation, or recommendation systems that suggest products you might like on a web-based storefront, or on movies on a streaming service, or a music streaming service, or anything like that. So again, the primary question: what happens, when algorithms try to dream us into existence? Very kind of lofty question, but it has a lot of weight to it, because the question really becomes, how are people interpreting our lived experience? And by virtue of that, when people use these tools who are not part of our community, who do not have any proximity to our community, how are they using it to represent us? Because it's not that difficult. In fact, arguably you could do it in less than 10, 15 minutes to create an entire persona that can be used to represent someone that's part of a marginalized community when you're not a member of that community. So this is the layout of the exhibit. This is just kind of a snapshot of a mock-up of the wall, one of the exhibit walls. So as you go through the exhibit, you see the images laid out along with prompts and discussion questions, because I really wanted the space of the exhibit to be a place where some of these discussions were happening, and to serve as almost a hub for people that are interested in AI, not only just from a generative perspective, but how it can be used in other applications, other community-driven applications. So part of that was making sure to include as much information as possible so that people can have the most informed decisions and conversations. Another adjacent wall of the exhibit with, again, some of these generated portraits, as well as the video, the intro of which that you saw at the beginning of this presentation, but it goes on further to give some additional examples, again, like the one I cited before that was used during the election, as well as some other ways that generative AI, as well as AI specifically, is being used in proximity to our community. So, all these images that you see on the right, again, all generated using a variety of different platforms, but all needing some additional reduction of the defaults of those tools, so that more authentic, quote unquote, depictions of our community can be shown. Some more varied aspects of our features can be shown. So, consider how easily technology enables digital blackface. And that goes to what I said before about people using these tools to represent us in ways that, one, we would not use to represent ourselves, or two, in ways to fraudulently represent us in ways so that they can, again, restructure power or reduce community involvement or, decision-making power. So again, how the AI generated images perpetuate colonial gazes, how our features are deemed low confidence by facial recognition software. This is, and part of the exhibit's exploration is, this is digital colonialism at work. The extraction and exploitation of cultural data without consent or context. Because again, these images are pulling from a data set to create an approximation of Blackness. So they're pulling from images that are available online. They're pulling from data that's being fed into these systems to say, this is what a Black person should look like. But again, I had to, and anybody that uses these tools, if you want to see more varied depictions, you're going to have to tell it so, because that's not the default. So not only is that cultural data being extracted without context or consent, but you still have to say that even though you have that data, your default isn't to give me something that looks authentic. But I would say our history teaches us something very powerful. We've always found ways to exist beyond these systems meant to contain us. Our ancestors, as we talk about Black History Month, our ancestors encoded freedom in quilts. They wove resistance in songs. They built community in the spaces that other people couldn't see. Now we're facing a new frontier where, our existence is being translated into ones and zeros, often, again, without our input or consent. The image on the left, created with one tool, you can take a different tool and, for lack of a better word, breathe life into it. And you can see that person just, quote unquote person, just kind of walked away out of frame, because the prompt that I gave it was, have this person walk out of frame. But part of what I think this also shows is how we train ourselves to recognize when these images are being shown or these videos are being shown. Notice aspects of the background didn't change. Notice the lighting didn't change. If there was actual movement of the person, there would be other aspects of what is featured in the video that would reflect that movement. Taking two images, and I'm sure you all have seen different apps that allow you to do it, taking two images and then doing something additional with them. So these two generated images on the left, and then prompting another tool to take those two images and say, have them walking and talking at night. Again, you can build out something very quickly that is used to represent people, or can be used to disseminate misinformation, that can be used to manipulate people. It's not as difficult as you may think, because the tools are so advanced and because they're so readily available. Some additional examples of taking two images and giving another tool a prompt, and then again, having it be something that is more lifelike, more engaging, more believable. But again, looking for those inconsistencies, like a hand that has maybe one too many fingers quickly out of frame, or a blink that doesn't seem quite natural. Like, we're moving into that space where you have to really scrutinize the things that you see. And so this is the example that I was mentioning before, where the default when given a prompt is the image on the left. There is a certain level of, again, there's a default standard that the tool understands as attractive or beautiful, but then it also depicts the way that they're wearing their clothing. The clothing is much tighter. That was not in my prompt. The clothing is form-fitting. The way the body is, none of that was in the prompt. The prompt was actually what was featured on the right. But what I had to do was tell the tool, move beyond what your default is. Reduce the stylization, your default stylization to 0. I'm not looking for what your interpretation is. I'm looking for what I stated. And again, there's a very clear depiction of Blackness in these two images. One that maybe is more Eurocentric focus in terms of its features, and that it isn't to discount anybody's features or anybody that may look closer to the left or look closer to the image on the left than the image on the right. What I'm simply saying is that most of the images that come out of most of these tools without additional changing of the tool results in more images of the left than of the right, because there's an idealized approximation that you're given as opposed to anything authentic that you might be looking for when you prompt these tools. So getting into why this matters, why this is important. As we navigate these issues, it's essential to consider the role of data collection in AI development and how data is used to, again, manipulate. But on the flip side, is it used for amplifying voices and advocating for change? The example on the left that I give here, I'm not sure if anyone is aware because it was very quickly discontinued once it was started, but Meta, the company, the overarching company that owns Facebook, Instagram, and several other businesses and products, they are determined, or they were determined at least, to have AI-generated profiles filter and be the majority on their platforms. So that is to say, you maybe 100% of the people you follow on Instagram right now are actual human beings. It's their goal that maybe they can reduce that to about 50%. And you're otherwise dealing with people that are again, in quotes, that are generated and that have full levels of interactivity. Like you could direct message them, they would respond back because they'd be powered by tools that would allow them to have reasonable conversations, as well as having images on their feed so that they would appear to have some level of humanity. So again, we have to prioritize participatory data collection methods, because I guarantee you that in a tool like this that Meta was doing for these profiles, they were using data gathered, they'll say with consent, because it's in the terms and conditions of whatever platform you use that they own. But I'm sure that if anyone had the choice, they wouldn't opt in for their identity to be used or their lived experience to be used in something like this. So other aspects of the overall project include, again, like I said, a zine workbook that's called Echoes of Code and Essence. A abbreviated version is available on my website. Most of them that are more fully featured in terms of additional writing prompts, conversation prompts, reflection prompts are available in the printed version. But again, what I wanted to do was I didn't want the exhibit to be a bunch of images printed out and posted on a wall. What I wanted it to be was, this is what's happening now. This is what's continuing to happen and evolving behind the scenes, whether you're aware of it or not. And this is how you can be made more aware. This is how you can think about how you interact with these platforms, how you interact with technology that you use every day. Because I know some people, and again, it's a theme that I wrestle with, some people use generative AI in really amazing ways to envision Black futures, to advance Black creativity, to enhance Black accessibility. But there's also the flip side of those tools. How much resources are they using? How are they impacting people that are not in power versus those that are in power? So those conversations, I think that there's no easy answer to them, but part of the themes of the exhibit is to make sure that you're asking those questions. Another part of the overall project is chapbook, a collection of creative works called Disembodied Reflections, the cover of which there my son drew. So just to want to shout out my son. Another aspect is a zine called Digital Marinage. It's a zine that explores how those practices inform contemporary digital resistance. It's the practice of enslaved people escaping and creating independent free communities. So what does that look like in a digital space? One of the most powerful historical examples of Black self-determination and resistance to oppression was that. So again, how can that be used in technological spaces? And there's a zine that I have that kind of gathers some thoughts about that, gathers some information about that. Because again, I'm looking to both sides of the conversation because I want to engage people that are both for and against, because I do think there's a way to meet in the middle so that it edifies our community and empowers us to do some amazing things. But it's going to involve some steps that I'll go through as we continue in the presentation that may seem difficult, but I promise are simpler than you think. Another zine that takes a structured and detailed approach to digital protest and resistance, outlining potential strategies for liberatory practices in digital spaces. Some other smaller mini zines that are also a part of the thematic exhibit or thematic presentation and project. So again, as you can see, there's a lot that goes into this idea that I'm working on, because it's not something that is, again, limited to just the exhibit in the physical space. There's going to be a virtual reality component. There's going to be an augmented reality component. There's going to be some other things that are happening both in physical and digital spaces, because I want us to be aware of how these technologies are being used. And again, how they can be used for our benefit, and how, when they're not used to our benefit, how we can work in resistance towards them. Again, some examples of some of these smaller mini zines that are available as well. So again, understanding AI is crucial for Black communities in navigating the digital age for several reasons. Knowing that narrow AI systems like facial recognition on loan applications are trained on data can help Black communities advocate for fair representation in those data sets. This awareness empowers them to challenge biased outcomes and demand accountability from those developing AI tools. As AI systems evolve towards understanding human emotions and intentions, it becomes crucial to ensure they are not perpetuating harmful stereotypes about Black individuals. Understanding the potential for bias in these systems allows us to form proactive measures to mitigate discriminatory outcomes. So one thing that I'm interested in doing as well through this project is promoting digital literacy and access. Again, that helps, that goes into helping people understand the different types of AI that are available, what their capabilities are, how that helps Black communities develop the digital literacy skills needed to navigate the ever-evolving landscape, bridging the digital divide. I mean, there's people that I've talked to in educational spaces where students are, like young students, elementary school, middle school, high school students, they're aware these things are happening when they're presented sometimes at a surface level. When I say surface level, a filter on a social media platform, or an app that allows you to do cool things, or a smart assistant on their phone, but they may not be aware of how pervasive these things are and how they're used in systems that even govern their health, their engagement to each other, their engagement with their communities at large. So I'm going to get a little technical, but I promise that I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible. So again, mitigating algorithmic biases through fairness-aware AI. So I'll explain what that means. Fairness isn't a checkbox for most of these systems. You can't go to ChatGPT and say, be fair to marginalized communities now. It's a process. One example is when Houston's Third Ward used, I think it's called Aquinas. They used it to audit their policing algorithms. They found that Black residents were 7 times more likely to be flagged as high risk. Now they're co-designing new models with Black coders and elders. Sunday schools can host hackathons to pressure local governments. In this instance, our task is community-powered implementation. One tool that is out there right now is called Latimer. It's a direct competitor to ChatGPT. They're approaching it as AI for everyone. So unlike typical language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or others, they're trained on more diverse data, a wider representation or wider range of representative texts to present a more accurate, fuller, and more authoritative picture of communities of color. So again, that's just one example. There's so many different examples out there, but to list them all would make this presentation like 3 hours. And one thing that I think will be really important for our communities to understand is available to them is local AI models. And what I mean by local AI models are AI models that can be accessed offline. So they're not using your data that you enter into them as part of their training model. So whenever you use ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or myriad of other tools, whenever you ask them a question, whenever you want them to do something, you're training them on whatever it is that you're submitting to them. So local AI turns marginalized communities from tech subjects to tech architects. So one example, in Nairobi's Kibera neighborhood, I believe is the pronunciation, a local language model helps residents contest land grabs by generating legal letters in Sheng slang, which is the language of the area that corporate AIs can't comprehend. So that's an example of a community using it for their benefit in the face of a corporate action that's working to their detriment. So this isn't just about access, it's about rewriting power structures. And that's, again, one of the themes that's explored in the exhibit. So I know it seems like I'm covering a lot, but that's because there's so much out there. And I just want us to be aware of different things. Again, a Sunday school can host model training workshops using old smartphones. In that instance, our task is liberation-focused deployment. These are some ways that allow us to use different AI models offline. So again, Misty is one. You can look it up right now. I believe it is, I think there's a pricing model associated with it, but I believe there is a free version that you can download, and then you can insert, it'll allow you to load up different AI models. But that information is stored on your computer or whatever the device that you're using it on. So it's not going to Meta, it's not going to Google, it's not going anywhere. It's just staying on your computer. And I know a lot of people use these language models like a ChatGPT to help them maybe parse through a document, or they use it in lieu of a search engine because it just gives them a more direct feedback of the information that they're looking for. That is still available to you, but it can be available to you offline. It doesn't have to tie into the current power structure. It doesn't have to tie into those tools that are being used actively against us. They can be used at a community level on your computer, on your phone, in ways that maybe you didn't even think about. Another example is GPT for All. You can download it. It can be your private and local AI chatbot. So again, there's so many tools that are out there. You don't have to depend on what is available to you because you see what's popularized in media or online. You can privatize it. You can make it directed towards community. It can be something that is more geared towards just what our community interests are. Open Web UI is another example. And LM Studio is a slightly more complicated example for those that are more technically inclined, but again, still free, can be downloaded, and you can use those models that you might use on a website, but you can use them on your computer. So to reclaim our digital existence, we must prioritize transparency and accountability in AI development. This can be achieved through the use of explainable AI techniques, which is, part of the presentation here and part of what a workshop might be, or, whatever might be, which will help provide insights into how AI decision-making processes work. Because I think by understanding those AI systems, we can identify and challenge those biases, and we can ensure that they serve the needs of our community. Communities are developing their own data sets, training their own models, creating spaces where code switching isn't necessary for survival. It's a growing awareness of how the information that we put out there is harvested and processed and commodified, coupled with active resistance to that information colonization. So in the end, Existence Beyond Code is both a investigation and a recognition. It's a project that's wrestling with the fact that while these tools can and do perpetuate harm, they may also offer unprecedented opportunities for reclaiming narrative power. And I know it's a lot, I know. And I think part of what I also wanted to do is make sure that it was relevant to the diverse communities that are maybe watching. But specifically, it's like, well, what does this mean in regards to the church? So this is why the conversation matters for the church, specifically for the Black church. And I don't mean that to say that any other church is wrong or anything like that, but there's a specific cultural component that comes with our faith tradition. And the Black church has always stood at the vanguard of liberation. I think that's an undebatable point. Not merely as spiritual stewards, but as architects of justice. So today, as artificial intelligence, reshapes every pillar of society, from criminal justice to healthcare to economic opportunity, silence on these technologies, I believe, constitutes a moral abdication. So why this matters? AI, number one, AI is reifying old oppressions. Predictive policing algorithms, for instance, target Black neighborhoods as high risk, echoing redlining. Hiring AIs downgrade resumes with Black sounding names, digitalizing employment discrimination. Our mandate, rescue those being led away to death, right? Proverbs 24:11. That also applies to algorithmic violence. The second point, data colonialism threatens sacred spaces. Facial recognition that tracks congregants entering sanctuaries. Mental health chatbots that erase Black spiritual and cultural practices and coping mechanisms. Our charge, protect the image of God in an age of digital objectification. The third point, generative AI erases our narratives. Digital blackface lets non-Black creators profit from AI-generated personas. Our response to that, I believe, write the vision, right? By training these AI models on our stories, our sermons, our songs, our history, our culture, that's writing the vision in this space. So just as the Black church harnessed radio and TV to spread a theology of liberation, I think we have a responsibility to steward AI as a tool for preservation, for economic justice, and prophetic advocacy. And for those that may need a biblical framework to all this, I'm going to reference the Tower of Babel, and for Genesis 11, and I'm going to reference Pentecost and Acts 2. So real quick, and I'm gonna close with this, but real quick, the Tower of Babel warns against technologies of centralized control. Pentecost models decentralized, equitable communication. AI sits at the crossroads of that. So the narrative of the Tower of Babel, I'm sure everybody's familiar. It's a peril of centralized power. That's the theme of that. Humanity united to build a tower to make a name for themselves, seeking godlike control through centralized technology at the time, which was baked bricks. God confounded their language, scattering them. The parallel to that now, modern tech giants hoarding data and algorithms to make a name, i.e. monopolize AI, creating systems that homogenize the human experience. Like Babel's bricks, AI can become a tool of arrogance, right? So come, let us build ourselves a model. We need to get into these spaces that are developing these tools and develop these tools on our own so that we can reflect what our community and culture need. Much of these larger AI platforms are elevating efficiency over equity, control over community, and are built to consolidate power. Pentecost, a blueprint for decentralized justice. So, the Spirit empowered diverse languages, decentralizing the gospel so all could hear in their own tongue, right? No single group controlled the message. The AI imperative, Pentecost models how technology here should serve. Each should hear it in their own language. AI should honor Black vernacular English. It should honor Creole. It should honor other cultural context. And no one claimed any possession as their own, right? Acts 4:32. Open source AI, downloading those models downloading those AI models offline, rather, that's resisting corporate hoarding. The Spirit democratizes tools of power, which is a rebuke to AI's tower tendencies. So we must champion AI that decentralizes power, liberates rather than exploits, multiplies justice through ethical stewardship, and roots itself in wisdom over just efficiency. The larger tools, they're all racing to be the fastest, to give you the best results, to seem more human. That's not what we need. We need technology that serves community, not at the expense of culture. The same fire that fueled abolitionist sermons and civil rights organizing, I think now illuminates AI's hidden biases. Our eschatological hope isn't in machines, but in ensuring technology serves the least of these. That should be a non-negotiable for this 21st century witness in the face of such emerging technology. So ultimately, what I think is that the choice may not be between AI or no AI, but between AI for empire and AI for people. So there's additional readings and resources. I don't know if you can read them all, but I'll make sure to share them so that they can be disseminated. But there's so many different organizations that are working, so many Black-centered organizations that are working at the forefront of AI and how it translates to the types of things we need as a community and as a culture. And there are so many people that are working, amazing people that are working both in a creative and a professional space that are worth checking out. I hope that you have an opportunity to investigate some of these things further. And I believe that is it. Existence Beyond Code, again, it's available at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. It's going to be up throughout this year, I believe. And then there'll be some additional components, like I mentioned before, that will serve as accessories to that exhibit and start to introduce more technological aspects, both physical and virtual. And I hope that I'll be able to share them all with you soon.
This is very informative and thought-provoking for us. So, Brother Kevin, thank you so much for your expertise and for this exhibit. I think this is fitting in a time where we're so inundated with technological questions and the intersection of power, race, and all the things that come with technology. So thank you. And for our hashtag Power Up family, if you could appreciate him in the chat and also with your questions. We had a number of questions that came up that we would love for your response to, particularly Pastor Patty here. She knows that there's cheat sheets for ChatGPT. Is there anything similar for the image generative platforms that you've mentioned during the presentation?
Yes, absolutely. There are so many, different cheat sheets that are relative to specific types of AI tools, whether they're image-based or video-based. And then there are some cheat sheets that are available at an individual platform level. I have a collection of them. I'd be happy to, share them just to make it easier for people so they don't have to track down things on their own and make sure that they're getting that information from sources that I would consider trustworthy in this space. But yeah, there's plenty of resources out there for that goal. And I think it behooves everybody to, even if it's not a specialized interest of yours or it exists in proximity to your professional or personal life, that you're just aware of what these things can do so you can educate yourself on how to spot the products of these platforms.
That's great. It's helpful. Very helpful. Just a comment here. I think we have a comment from Roberta. I've noticed that the Miss Black identity when searching for Black inventors, specifically a photo of a Black man, inventors use as the identity for Black men and their inventions. And I guess I kind of highlight some of the generative pieces that you're talking about that we have to keep informing the technology to actually have our perspectives, our voices, our images in mind. So that's very helpful comment there. Question here from Pastor McNair. For those who aren't as savvy with the verbiage, can you explain the number system? And there's a couple things that you mentioned there. I guess you mentioned 1 and 0. Could you dive into that a little bit more?
Sure. So to that, there's going to be, look, I'll try to keep it kind of as simple, as succinct as possible. That's going to be dependent on the platform. So there's one popular platform that's available right now called Midjourney. Some of the images that I generated and some of the kind of investigation for me started with that particular platform. So with that platform, you would give it a written prompt, much like you would any of these platforms like a ChatGPT or Gemini or anything else. But there's certain conditions that you can add to the prompt specific to that platform. Like you can say, output it at this size, output the image at this size. But you also can say, relative to that platform, reduce your stylization to 0. And you wouldn't use that exact phrasing, but I'm just using that, I think, to just make it as digestible as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But you would say to that platform, reduce your default settings to 0 or even into negative settings. And you'll notice that once you do that with some of these platforms, the closer you get to a more varied and authentic depiction of Blackness, because that's not the default.
Mm-hmm.
The default is way more stylized, arguably way more Eurocentric, and just not a reflection, a consistent reflection of that variability in the Black experience. Because again, we're not monolithic.
That's right.
So our depictions, even in a virtual space, should be just as varied as they are in reality.
Absolutely. Very good insight there to us. I think you mentioned this during your time, but it'd be helpful for those listed platforms that we can create our own data sets from. If there's a way that we can provide that, whether that's through our chat or we can come back to the recording of this and make sure that we have that in there, but that would be so helpful. Similarly, an email resource guide will be, okay, wonderful. Look at that. Your duo already on it. So we'll make sure that we'll have that email resource guide to you all, some platforms and some of the information that was shared today. Such an informative conversation. Having worked in higher education, it's been a plethora of conversations about how do we use this in a way that is AI in a way that is generative and not degenerative, right? To how we think, process, and perceive reality. And so that we need to talk about this, particularly in the church. And I'm thankful that you brought up the image and the history of the Black church, the liberating perspectives of the Black church, and how we make sure that we bring that narrative into these forms of technology where power and influence will dominate if we don't contribute. And so it's helpful to use our power and use our influence where we can to make sure that the narrative is as inclusive of us as it is of anyone that's involved. And so thank you so much for sharing today. Do you have any final comments at all, or anything you would like to add? You had such an informative presentation, but if there's anything you want to add before we close on today, the floor is yours.
I appreciate that, Elder. Thank you. I think I see this last question here.
Yes.
I think we can end on that. Will AI desensitize our culture as we know it? And I think the answer to that is, if unguarded, it can, because it already has started to.
Mhm.
And the reason I say that is because, again, a lot of these platforms, all these AI generative platforms, they're almost operating on a feedback loop. And what I mean by that is you might see an image generated with this, and if somebody posts it on social media, for instance, that feeds right back into the same system. So as opposed to these data sets being driven by actual human work, actual human images, they're going to start feeding on itself. And you're going to get this weird feedback loop of just nothing but AI generated everything. And we're not that far from it now, which is why I advocate not only an understanding and a form of literacy in terms of recognizing these things, but understanding how to use these tools for yourself, making them offline, and thinking about other use cases for them as opposed to what's presented to you and what's put in front of your face in terms of like a Facebook or an Instagram or whatever. You can use these things to help solve problems. Maybe you can solve a food desert in the city by allowing it to do some of the heavier lifting in terms of some of the administrative work or something. But again, maybe that's something that's downloaded to your computer, so you don't have to worry about that data or that personal information getting out. So there's use cases that I believe will make the difference, so that even if AI is everywhere, when we're using it in the scope of community, it can be something that is potentially beneficial for us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that perspective there. And I know for some of you that are watching right now, will be watching, you have more questions and thoughts about AI and just the use of technology. Just know that we are going to be exploring this topic during AIM 2025 in Phoenix. And so be thinking about some things, particularly for the Sunday school department. We want to make sure that we get these perspectives out in a way that is both helpful for the church and helpful for the world at large. And so, Mr. Kevin Johnson, brothers, thank you so much for your time here. And for you all that are joining us, continue to join us. We are here every Tuesday. So we look forward to having you here again on #PowerUp. We hope you have a good evening. And if you got questions, put them in the chat or explore or do those things to make sure that you start thinking about that as we get to AIM 2025. So have a good evening, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much for joining us today. #PowerUp is part of the learning and development arm of the International Sunday School Department of the Churches of God in Christ. We invite you to sow into this ministry. Your gift in any amount will help us continue to share leading edge biblical educational solutions and leadership tools to churches, districts, missions, and jurisdictions of all sizes. Along with our president, Mark Ellis, we are aiming to continue to reach, teach, minister, assimilate, build, and involve people for the furthering of the kingdom of God. Furthermore, we want to eradicate biblical illiteracy. Your gift in any amount makes you part of this effort as well. God bless you in advance for your gift. We pray that the Lord richly blesses you.